Hello, Brian here. I shouldn't be filming this video because it's very late and I should actually be going to bed, but I have just been editing the video that I made recently and probably will have posted by the time you see this one on 7 reasons to learn tarot. And as I was editing it, it occurred to me that it's all very well to talk about reasons to learn tarot, but it's probably also worth talking about how to use tarot beyond the basics, and beyond the usual. I don't mean the basics, I mean the usual. So, of course, we're going to use tarot for divination, the practice of tapping into what God, the universe, the powers that be, your higher self, your inner wisdom, etc., want you to be doing in this life. Those kind of inner whispers, tapping into those, getting in touch with those. Of course, we're going to use it for, coaching. That's my thing, tarot coaching. So using it as a coaching tool. And some I know will use it for fortune telling, prediction. That's not my thing. That's not really how I use it, but I'm very open to the fact that many do, and I don't turn away from the fact that the cards can sometimes show us things or hint things to us that then we discover do indeed come to pass. So I'm certainly not a snob when it comes to the idea of tarot being used in a predictive way. But I wanted to talk to you about, in what I hope will be a fairly short video, 3 kind of unusual ways, or unusual by my way of thinking, to use tarot beyond those kind of obvious do a spread for insight and higher connection and prediction and coaching. Those 3 ways that I have just mentioned, which are fairly standard ways of using tarot. So the first one that I want to talk about is the idea, and this isn't all that unusual, the idea of using tarot as a creative tool. So I do a lot of work with, in my coaching work, with creatives and entrepreneurs, people who are building their businesses or people who are involved in creative arts like writing. And of course I use tarot for myself in creative ways when I'm developing courses or writing books or putting together coaching programs and so on. I have used tarot very often to help me in that endeavor. And in terms of using it in a creative way, there's various things you can do. You can use the cards as a way of stimulating ideas if you're looking for ideas, or, bringing ideas out of yourself that you wouldn't otherwise perhaps be able to access. Once you've got those ideas, you can use the cards to help you structure your thoughts. So one of the things I might do, for example, if I'm planning, the best example is if I'm planning to do a piece of creative writing, particularly if it's fiction writing, I have seen myself use the card to almost inquire into what a particular character's motivations are going to be, and then how their part of a plot might play out. And usually I would use the cards in terms of tapping into what their motivations might be. I would possibly more often use the cards in the traditional way of shuffling and pulling cards that are face down, so I don't know what the cards are, seeing what the cards are and seeing what that tells me or hints to me or suggests to me about what the character's motivations might be. When it then comes to structuring the plot, I'm more likely to use the cards face up to work out, what might happen next, and if that happens, what might happen next. So that's one of the things that you can do. And in the non-fiction sense, if I'm using the cards to help me plan a non-fiction book, or more recently, coaching courses and training courses, teaching courses, then I would use the cards to help me make a plan. So again, perhaps I would have been, inquired and used the card to help me flesh out some ideas. But then when it comes to structuring things, I would actually look to the cards almost as kind of flashcards as a way of helping me structure the plan. And it works particularly well if in doing that, you use the cards that have come out of the insight part of the process if you make sure that those are incorporated into the plan part of the process. It's almost like the seed of the inspiration then is built into what comes next. That's my way of thinking around that. So that's one way. There are a myriad of different ways you can use tarot creatively. There are books on the subject. There's all kinds of things you can find online about how to do that. You can use your imagination, I'm sure, but tarot as a creative tool. That's one unusual but practical way to use the tarot. Another way of using the tarot that I like very much, and I've called this video unusual but practical ways. Some of these are not going to be unusual for some of you because you use the tarot this way all the time, and but for others they're kind of new. So this second one I find particularly useful, and it's using the cards to help me assess the energy of a situation or a circumstance. So it's not necessarily at this point about knowing the detail of what's happening or what might happen or what should happen or what I want to happen or any of that. It's simply about assessing the energy. A bit like when those of you or those of us who are intuitive, we often have the experience of, certainly I have this experience of walking into a room and being able to pick up the vibe of that room fairly quickly, or meeting a new person and being able to pick up quite a lot of vibrational information, if you like. Intuition, using your intuition as a way of feeling your way in the world. And the cards can be used in this way as well. So you have a circumstance, you want to just take a bit of a temperature check on that circumstance or situation, and you use the cards as a way of assessing the energy. So it's literally about pulling a card. And what I tend to do is to not look at the card as being the answer to the question, what is the energy? I look to the card or cards as a cue for me to get in touch with my own response to the energy. So what I mean by that is, if I am trying to analyze or assess the energy of a particular situation, I try to contemplate the circumstances of that situation. Maybe it's about a meeting at work, or maybe it's about some kind of task that I need to fulfill, or maybe it's about a conversation I have to have with somebody. I will think about that, I'll frame it in my mind, and I'll talk in a future video about why that's very important when one is using tarot. And then I'll pull a card, and I will look to see what the card might mean in the context of that energy assessment. But more importantly, I will look to see how I'm responding to what the card's saying. Am I, for example, pulling away from it energetically, feeling like maybe it's uncomfortable and I'm pulling away, or am I moving towards it? Is it drawing me towards it? So the way that this might work is, let's just, I've got my cards here, so let's just do a quick example. Let's say I'm thinking about a particular thing I have to do. Maybe it involves other people, maybe it's a meeting, maybe it's a conversation, maybe it's a joint project of some sort, and I want to know the energy of it. Is it going to be successful? Are the circumstances right? Am I partnering with the right people? Have we chosen the right time to start working together? Have we got the right tools and resources? Have we picked the right thing to collaborate on, etc., etc.? What's the energy? And I shuffle, I get into the mindset of thinking about that circumstance. I shuffle my cards, I select a card. Oh, we had this in the previous video, the Knight of Pentacles. So solidity, stability, calmness, generosity, openness, non-pushiness. I feel a lot of positive feelings about this card, so I find myself being drawn towards it. So if this is the energy of the situation that I have effectively pulled out of the deck, the assessment of the energy. I don't know why I'm holding it over here when the camera's there, sorry. I feel drawn to that. This would give me a positive sense of the energy of the situation that I'm trying to look into. If I responded differently to this card and was pulling away from it, it would tell me the energy is slightly different, as in it might not be the positive energy I want to see in this circumstance. In this case, I feel a positive sense. So this is a good indication to me that the energy is on point. So that is number 2, energy assessment, and pay attention to your own response to the tarot's assessment of the energy. That's where the pearl is. That's where the treasure is in terms of how you respond. A third unusual but practical way to use a tarot that I have been thinking about is the process of using the cards to help me transmute emotion. So this might be about where I have maybe uncomfortable emotions about a particular circumstance or situation. Maybe I'm feeling sad or feeling stressed or angry. And what I want to do is move on from that. I want to process the emotion. I want to transmute it, not get rid of it, not deny it, not ignore it, but transmute it, turn it into something more positive. So the way that I would do that is, again, I would get in touch with the emotion. And what I would do is, this is an example of where I would probably not be doing, pulling the cards blind, as it were, face down. But instead, what I would do is I would go through the deck and I would try and find cards that represent emotion. Here we are, look, here's a good example. And again, this was in the previous video, which I don't know whether that means I just haven't shuffled the cards very well, or if it's telling me there's a consistent theme in my videos lately. So let's say this is my emotion: worry, stress, anxiety, sleeplessness, not very pleasant. I'll just take the next card that's next to it. Here's joy, contentment, security, pleasure, love. So I want to move from this to that. So using the cards to transmute the emotion is finding a card that identifies my current state, and then another card that identifies and represents where the state I want to get to. And then it's a case of building a bridge between those states. And you can do that in a number of different ways. Of course, you can ask yourself what you need to do in order to move from A to B or A to Z. But another way is to use the cards and to build that bridge. Select other cards to help you figure out, well, what do I need to do next? What might I need to embody next? What resources might I need to draw on? And you can do that either by doing a reading where you're pulling cards face down, or you can build the bridge by consciously choosing cards to represent the journey you go on. So there's very many different ways of transmuting emotion using tarot, but that's one of the ways that springs to my mind. And one of the things to say on that particular process actually is that if you are someone who is interested in and au fait with the use of the cards as representations of the paths on the Kabbalistic tree of life, then what you can also do, and you don't need to be a Kabbalist to do this, you don't even need to use the tree of life to do this, because the principle is the same. So, those two cards that I showed you, which I've now lost. No, here they are. Not lost them. They're still here. From there to there, there's a path between these two states. What is the path? You figure that out in whatever way is right for you, and perhaps you take some cards as representations, and then you path work the cards. You visualize engaging with the cards, you maybe step into the cards, you embody the cards, you meditate on the cards, whole range of different things you can do that helps guide you and guide your consciousness from point A to point B. So you can do that without any kind of Kabbalist trappings. But if you are into the Kabbalah and you know where particular cards sit on the tree of life, then what you can do is get into quite interesting processes where you look at where your the card that represents your original state is. Where is it on the tree of life? What cards, what spheres on the tree of life and paths on the tree of life is that card connected to or connecting? And therefore, what other cards might you need to pull into play in order to move you to whatever state it is you want to be in? Now, clearly, if you're going to do that, you need to know something about the Kabbalah. You need to know something about the Tree of Life and what the spheres represent and the paths represent and the dynamic flow of energy through the spheres, all that kind of stuff. But that's very doable if you are into Kabbalah, and you can certainly use that as a way of helping you transmute emotion. So that's the third way. And then the fourth way, and I've talked about this in other places, including in my Tarot Coach Session Success workshop, where I talk about various techniques of using the cards in a coaching context. And one of the most effective I have found, and enjoyable, and in some ways the easiest, because everyone gets this, or most people do, is vision boarding with the cards. So if you decide you want to do something, you want to achieve something, you want to get somewhere, you want to create something, then you can use the cards as material for a vision board. So a vision board, of course, is a representation, a visual representation of the state you want to find yourself in. And you would go through the card, and you again, probably face up, you would go through and you would select appropriate card. Perhaps you wanted to train for the priesthood, so the Hierophant would almost certainly be a card that you would want to engage the services of, and you'd find other things that, you know, represent whatever your vision is. The various ways then to do things. You can either arrange the cards on your on a table somewhere, on your altar if you have one, in the configuration that is a representation of your vision, and just leave it at that. Maybe perhaps every so often, as you go past that place, you stop and you contemplate the cards and you're absorbing the energy of what that vision is. You might want to do something a bit more elaborate, take a photo of it. You might have a spare set of cards that you're prepared to stick onto things, or maybe you photocopy the images. There's all kinds of different things that you can do to represent to create the vision board. And then there's different things you can do to kind of charge that vision board, if you like. You could do a spell or a ritual, or just a meditative practice where you're kind of putting energy in and intention into that vision board. I had a client who did something I thought was really wonderfully creative. She was a sculptor, and she had created a vision board for something that she wanted to achieve, and she was quite sophisticated in her way of thinking about this. So she applied some of the kind of methodology you see in chaos magic, where sigils are created to represent an intention, and then the idea is that you in the sigil you almost kind of try to turn it into something that doesn't, in its own form, doesn't have an obvious meaning. So you're writing a sentence, you're taking out the vowels, you're taking out repeating letters, and then you're configuring the remaining consonants into a symbol that in itself doesn't look anything like the original statement or the original intention. It's quite abstract, in other words, and then you charge it up with energy. There's a variety of ways of doing that, and you try to forget it. Put it out of your consciousness and let it do its work. And that can be a very powerful, magical technique. And she was aware of this technique, and she could see some parallels between that and the vision boarding exercise. So what she did was she created her vision board using the tarot, first of all, by selecting the appropriate cards, and she created this whole thing. She stuck the cards, she had a spare deck, and she stuck the cards onto a big flip chart. She got it exactly where she wanted it to be. And then what she did was she used her ability as a sculptor to create a sculpture, an abstract sculpture that represented that vision board. And then she used the sculpture as the focal point for her vision, and she charged that with intention and with magical ritual and so on, in order to embody the power and the energy of her vision. I'm getting goosebumps talking about it because it was such a great idea, and I loved it, and it was very effective as well. And yes, so that's it. That is my quick, not quite as quick as I thought it might be, but it's quickish video of three. I think there's actually four there, so I don't know why I've said three. There was using it creatively, using it to assess energy, transmuting emotion, and then vision boarding. Yeah, I suppose the vision boarding kind of fits into the second one, but anyway, it's late. So this is actually 4 unusual and practical ways of using the tarot beyond the basics. And I'll have to try and explain that in the title now, but who cares? I hope you enjoyed this video as much as I enjoyed making it, and I'm going to go to bed now, and I'll see you all again very soon.